Okay, so what are some ideas you came up with about, or you talked about, related to making connections with families? Is it important? Do you do it? Why do you do it or not do it? How about the hard to reach families? Why are they important? So who wants to share? Yeah. Thank you.
I was saying the amount I contact really varies depending upon the family. One thing that does inhibit me with some of my families is I have some Spanish-speaking families, and I don't know anything beyond hola, and that won't get very far in a conversation. So with those families, like I'll try to send home like letters like once a month, just kind of be like, this is what's happening, and then I share like community events and anything like that that's coming up, and I hope Google Translate does an accurate job of sharing that information. But there are other families who, since I'm itinerant, I don't have an office number, like I'm not anywhere often enough, so they have my cell phone number, so parents will text me and they'll tell me things. Over the summer, I had a mom who called me when she was at the audiologist because it didn't make sense to her what the audiologist was saying, so I was on the speakerphone with her and the audiologist. And then I have other families who, like, they don't reach out and contact at all, and like I'll share, like I send home newsletters every month kind of saying this is what's coming up, this is like local, like just like local events, and also kind of if there's something that I'm working on with a lot of students. But I kind of put it in the parents' court, like I tell them, like, you contact me about anything and everything you need to, and then I contact if the student does something like amazing that I'm super proud of what they did, or if there is a concern. But it really, like, I do put a lot of it in the parents' court, how much we communicate.
Okay. So but it sounds like you have an open door policy, certainly by giving out your cell phone. And I don't know about the translation. The schools, I guess, don't have people to help with some of.
They have to like hire out, and like I'm only in one building, but they have one translator for like 3 different buildings.
Yeah.
So they're not in the building.
Okay. So not having the translator there can really put a burden. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mention also that just having the ability to sign to the student when the parents don't have that ability, then that makes you a contact person that they're familiar with, who can, and a lot of times will ask you to sort of interpret for their families back and forth. Parents will ask me a lot of information about their children while I'm doing home visits, but sometimes just the familiarity is just having someone to communicate with.
Yeah. We were talking, while you guys were talking, about how your role sometimes is you're the one who's really helping the parents get to know their children, right? Especially if they're deaf, where if the family doesn't know sign language, that you're the conduit to tell them more about their child as the child's language communication skills become more advanced. That role becomes really critical for you. Other ways people are connecting. Yes, Lisa.
A lot of times parents, especially kids with behavior, they're always getting phone calls or notes home about the negative things that are going on. So when you do call or try to reach out, they're looking at the phone like, okay, what happened now?
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's important to, submit some positive stuff to the parents sometimes, so they could say, oh yeah, they had a good day today, that's awesome. Whether it's through a take-home journal or an email or just a simple note, so that they can get being comfortable with communicating with you.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
they always think it's something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, kids' reputations precede them, right? So some of you work together and you had the kindergartner and you have Miss First or whatever, where you already know that child's coming into your classroom, and if he or she has been a child who's had some rough periods, you already may know that, right? Fortunately or unfortunately. So making sure you establish positive relationships with the family members so that it's not, I'm sending home the notes or calling you because I have some challenging issues.
Being that I work in a residential setting, it's really difficult for the parents a lot of times emotionally, because we do spend more time with their children than they do. And the whole picture is worth 1,000 words, sending the pictures of the good, the bad, so that they feel that connection.
Yeah, great point. I mean, digital nowadays and computers enables you to do so many things that years ago we couldn't do. So connecting with families when they're at a school like Phillip Rock, where the kids are living there, and so the families really may only see them weekly or monthly. Someone back, I'm like, ooh, had their hand up.
I was just going to say, to make the point of, if you're sending home something that happened that day and it may be a negative situation, always make sure you use something positive too. Because as a parent who gets those phone calls that are always negative, you get sick of it and you're like, I'm just not answering.
Yeah.
You can't find one thing that my kid does right, because they come home and I see all those flaws, but I also see all these good points too.
Yeah.
So even though you're saying, oh, today they jumped up on the table and flipped the thing, but you know what? When he stood in line for 2 seconds, he did it.
Right.
You can find something. You can't tell me you can't.
Yeah. That reframing, right? We were talking about earlier. Find something, you know, that you can say and do the positives, because it starts to, otherwise, like you said, you don't want to answer the phone calls. You don't want to open the backpack. You don't want to engage with that teacher. You're not going to show it. You don't want to go to parent-teacher conferences.
Well, I'll go, but you're not going to like what I'm
You say.
because you're not finding anything
Yeah.
There's ways to do that.
Right. Okay. Krista.
Whenever I do make those phone calls or send those emails home about behaviors, like this is what we saw today, I always try to talk about, if I saw a function of the behavior, like here's why I think this might have happened, here's what we're going to do next time to try and help, just to let the parent know, like, hey, we're on a team. Yes, your child, had a rough day, but here's, what we're going to do to try to help your child.
Right.
Because it makes them feel, I think, like you're on their side, you care about their child, and it's not just, you're not just totally annoyed and frustrated with him or her, but you're trying to work together for the better of the child. And
Absolutely.
it makes them know that you care about their kid.
Yeah. So you care about them, you're working as a team, and you want to solve, you're trying to figure it out, right? It's kind of like we're all detectives in all of this, that we don't have all the answers. Things present themselves that we don't know why they happened, why a child did something, why we were, we may not know why we reacted the way we did, but okay, let's step back, we'll try to problem solve. Okay, let's think about teams now. How many of you are on a team, or you don't, or how many of you work solo? No team at all? You have no teams at all that you work with? How many of you are on teams? Okay, I would hope most of you feel like you're on teams rather than feeling like you're in it alone, but you might be in it alone. Oops. Sorry, I don't know why that came up. Okay, so most of us in special ed work on teams of some sort. So we may work with speech paths, OTs, PTs, classroom teachers, families as members of our team, that we're not alone. How do you build relationships? Well, do you think it's important for a team to have good relationships? How many of you have ever been on a team that didn't work so well? Yeah. Not fun, right? No. And many times, if a classroom team is not working well, you can feel it, right? You walk into that room, as someone who places student teachers, I mean, we've had student teachers come to us and go, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. There's so much tension in that room that it's really hard for them to learn any new skills because of the tension that's going on. So we all agree it's important to have good relationships on teams, right? Okay, so now talk for a minute about how do you build those relationships? What's worked for you in building relationships with your team members, particularly around children with challenging behavior? So talk for a second about that. Okay, lunch is standing between us having a discussion about teams and you leaving this room. Or I guess our discussion about teams is standing between you and lunch. How's that? That's probably a better way to say it. Okay, so let's kind of focus on this. How do you build relationships? What's worked for you? So a couple ideas from people about, certainly you've all had probably some good and some not so great experiences. So tell us what's worked or what you've done to help develop good team relationships.
I don't think I have any magic answers. I think people are people, and just like you build relationships with kids, you build relationships with team members, colleagues, staff. Even I'm thinking a lot of this stuff is applicable to my husband. I can tell him.
Sounds good. I've used my husband in many papers. He's been a role. I say he's a work in progress, though, so I don't know. Maybe I'll take my PhD away. Yeah, I think you're right, though, but I think sometimes we get caught up in our job, like we're so busy. As someone who's very task-oriented, like do the task, and you have to slow down and go, okay, no, we got to develop the relationships will keep us afloat and keep this going. Yeah, great.
as hard as it might be sometimes because we're all so busy, but finding time to spend with our teammates on things that are not work related, whether it be like a 5-minute conversation in the morning, oh, how was your weekend? Or, oh, tell me about this play that you're in. Or finding time to go out and have lunch on a half day or something like that where you can, maybe you end up talking about work, but you're doing it maybe in a different place or under a different like frame. And then also when you get in that rut of complaining with your teammates about, oh, this kid, oh, this staff, oh, this, to try to reframe it or kind of deflect and find something positive about the situation. You know, well, he can't do this, but remember before when he was doing this and now this is happening instead, and trying to look for those positives. Be the sunshine.
Yes, yes, and I think the reframing, like you said, it works well with our teammates too. So they're always too busy, they're always running late. Okay, how can I reframe that? They have some good skills. So what are, you know, what else could be going on? Yeah, who else? Yes. And then if you pass it to her when you're done.
We had definitely talked about doing other things that have nothing to do with actual work, but then also when you are like talking with each other, adding a little humor to some situations, because a lot of times we're just like overwhelmed with all of the negative or all of the bad, and like sometimes when you can laugh about what did happen or bring some humor to it, then it allows you to be able to kind of move on, and it limits the stress a little bit. And some people don't work with being super stressed. Like some people, it's uncomfortable, and so allowing that. And then another thing we talked about was playing off of each other's strengths. When you learn your team, you know each other's weaknesses, or you know your own weaknesses, so then you're able to kind of build off of each other's strengths and what you know each person is good at in order to be as effective as you can be.
Yeah. That's great. So 2 things she said. Humor, I think, is critically important. And then also the team strengths. So we often do that hot button activity with teams. Like think about a teaching assistant and a teacher. If I know whining gets on my nerves and I'm your teaching assistant, and you see I'm getting frustrated, if you know that about me, you're more likely to step in and give me a break. But we have to have that relationship first where we can talk about things like that and go, I know I flare, I react not very well when he's whining or he's touching me or he's in my space. And if you know that, you're more likely to help each other out then. Yeah, so her and the gray right there. Thanks.
So our weekly newsletter started last year. We submitted photos of ourselves and then like interesting information that we didn't think people on our teams would know. And Becca's been putting them out all last year. So it was like a new staff member of the week to kind of get to know each other, which then like sparked some conversation like, oh, you like to do that? I like to do that too. And you had some common things to talk about. This year she's doing baby pictures and you have to like try to guess that like staff
Great
member,
idea.
which was fun. And then we've also, like she's put like questions on like at the end, you know, to make sure you've actually watched to the end of the video or like actually read to the bottom of the newsletter. There's like a what's your favorite movie, or, you know, what would you do if you weren't a teacher kind of questions that then she'll throw the responses out. And then we also recognized like all of these buildings that we're in have like sunshine clubs or like social clubs, and like we don't necessarily participate in those because we're like a very small section of the school, but we decided this year to start our own. So we now have like our co-op now has a sunshine club, and we've been recognizing staff birthdays or, you know, surgeries or deaths in the family or things like that, just to be a little bit more supportive of the staff. And we did a Google form survey. You know, what's your favorite candy? What's your favorite place to get a beverage? Where do you like to shop? You know, just fun little stuff like that, so that when we do get them a little something for their birthday, we know it's their favorite candy or their favorite, you know, drink or something like that. So it's been really helpful. And then we've done this year one so far, social hour, where we've tried to get people together, and then we've used some of our funds from that to, you know, get an appetizer or get a beverage for a staff member that's there. So.
Great idea. So great ways to really support social. The newsletter, great idea, so that people can learn about each other. You may not have ever interacted with Mary down the hall or Johnny down there, but by seeing things in a newsletter, you can pick it up. We actually have a social committee in our department, and some of the other departments are like, what's the matter with you having a social department? or social committee. But you know what? It helps with, like, they help organize a holiday party, a back to school potluck. If someone, someone's parent passes away or someone has a baby, we all donate some money and they help kind of keep us organized. But we also, like for faculty meetings, we always bring food, and different committees take charge of bringing the food. So you're going to get breakfast every month when we have a staff meeting, but you're only responsible for 2 out of the year of bringing some items. So I think food and humor and figuring out ways so people can get to know each other are great, great ideas. It's critical. It's really important that your teams work well together, or you're not going to be happy going to work, right? You got to be able to rely on each other because these jobs can be super stressful. So figuring out how to help build those relationships, I think, is really important. All right. Checking my time. Steve's going to direct us to lunch. Let me just tell you, when we come back, we're going to move up on the pyramid and look at environments, and then we'll go to targeted supports. Any feedback, anything, I don't know, anything I could do different over lunch besides like make new PowerPoints or something that's totally impossible? Is it going okay? Are you getting a couple ideas that you'll walk away with? Yes. Okay, good. All right, good. Okay, so now we're going to move up to environments and talk about the environmental tier. And that can mean home environments, classroom environments. It can mean an environment if you're out in the hall working with a child. So what are some things, and I'm going to go a little quickly for the last hour and a half because, of course, I over-prepare, which I tend to do. And so now I have like 80 slides left to do. So I may go a little more quickly here and skip through some stuff. So what about environments? What about high quality environments? They should support engagement for all children. You're familiar with universal design for learning, I assume? Okay, so you should use universal design for learning strategies, multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, multiple means of expression, and you should make accommodations, provide support which is necessary when necessary for children. So if all of those things are in place, then our goal is that children will be engaged, that we promote the engagement of every single child. So a couple things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the physical environment, then we'll talk a little bit about schedules and routines, transitions, expectations and rules, and then ongoing monitoring and providing positive attention. I'll go through these kind of quickly, but all of these things we consider make up the environment. All of these are a piece of the environment. So when we're thinking about it, I mean, this is like speaking to the choir with you guys, you're always thinking about the children with sensory impairments, right? And considering the needs of them within any given environment. And then how can an environment be designed so that it prevents problem behavior? So let's look at this environment. What do you think this environment tells any young child, most young children? Huh? It's okay to be messy? Okay. What about all this? Run around, right? Room to run. Let's run around. Let's have a dance party in the middle, right? Lots of open space. It doesn't really give me much direction of where to go, right? So it doesn't really give the children, I mean, there's some direction of where things are, cubbies are, but yeah, maybe kind of orderliness is not so important to this particular teacher or the adult in this room. But boy, there's a lot of space where if we think about some of the children we know with challenging behavior, that could be a problem, right? Okay, let's look at this environment. What are some environmental cues you see in this environment? Where to line up, right? Feet. Here's a play area, and here's a fence. So when we're lining up, are we reaching over and grabbing things out of the play area? Not. How about the door? Stop sign. Don't go any further. Don't go out of the door. When you line up, wait there. Okay. So we need to structure environments for success, particularly for young children when they're learning kind of the expectations. What are things you see for middle schoolers or high schoolers in an environment that structure it for success for them? What are a couple ideas of things you see? Schedule written out. Okay, schedule written out, yep. So they know what comes next. Oh, the bell? A bell ringing or something going off to cue them it's time to change. Lockers, I don't know, my son has a locker, he says he never uses it, but I know there are lockers in high schools, right, that you could use if you didn't want to carry the 20-pound backpack everywhere. Yeah, somebody over here, yeah. Okay, so groups together, cooperative group areas where children can work, so that kind of tells us in the environment, this is where we're working in small groups. Well, even when I called Sherry about today, I said, are the tables going to be in the rounds, or how are the tables going to be set up? Because I wanted to know in my head, like if I was planning activities or having you talk to each other, visually, what was the environment going to look like? It helps me, it helps us, right? When we're teaching too, to know what's this environment like. Okay, we want to help all children be successful in the environment. So we might do things, now here's where I need your help too. Children with visual impairments, so we have a couple of teachers that are visually impaired in here. For seeing children and children who are typically developing, we can give them song choices, say in early childhood. And again, like we talked about, maybe for some children just learning, if they're choosing some signs, or some songs, we may only give them 2 choices so that that's an easier choice to make. For children with visual impairments, how might we give them choices when they can't see the board maker? Use a tactile. Okay, so we might orally tell them what those choices are, say them to them, or have things tactily so they can feel what the different, something that represents, if they were a younger child, the different songs. Same, I assume, for like we often give in an environment, we might have visual supports to help a child know how to progress and how to engage in an activity independently. Again, the same kind of thing for children with visual impairments. You may put something tactily to show them what the steps are, have them feel those, or orally tell them what they are. It's a balance between trying to help children be more independent, right? By having things up there like this so that they could be more independent, but also trying to figure out communicatively. Sometimes we want children to initiate more, so then we have to have a balance of what helps children be more independent and where are they doing things independently where they're not really engaging and interacting with anyone else. And then an environmental cue about whose turn is what. So we have especially in early childhood classrooms, issues around like using a computer, using an iPad. Everybody wants to do it. So how, whose turn is it, who's next? You might have a timer nearby that tells them how long they can play with it, and then kids kind of line up. And here they've used photos so that whose turn is it, and use a Velcro and take it off so that children can do that independently, but they can also see when it's their turn. For a child with visual impairments, you might have some kind of textures that a child would know where his turn is along the list, along the lineup of children. And similar kind of thing, task sequence. Someone mentioned earlier calendars. I mean, I don't know about all of you, but I would be lost if I didn't have my calendar to know what am I doing. I don't know what meetings I have tomorrow till I look on my phone or on a printed out calendar that I print. Children like to know what's coming next. So having a sequence of what comes next in an activity or across the day. And again, taking into account a child's sensory issues, how you might structure that, help them structure that so that they can be as independent as possible. When we think about activities or we think about centers, we want to make sure they're relevant to children's needs, interests, and lives. So culture comes into play here, but also you all talked about knowing children's interests. So knowing that this child really likes baseball, and so how can I engage in activity, a math activity around baseball and around looking at the sports section and figuring out math around something the child likes. That they're engaging and interesting, that they have a variety of materials. But when we're working on social skills, we have to balance that. We don't want to have so many materials that a child can engage independently. So we want to make sure there's some sharing, some social engagement. So variety of materials, but also being careful of limiting the materials. And then rotate it on a regular basis. Make sense? All right, so it's a little dark, but look at these 2 writing centers. One right here, one right here. Look at them for a second. Notice some differences. You notice differences in them? Okay, which one are you attracted to and why? Okay, someone, you're attracted to the bottom one, this one, why? Okay, because it's organized, okay? Someone else, yeah? It has help for me. I can make my letters. Okay. So it's got some guidance, it's got some letters there, so if I need help, it's got a model. Somebody else, yeah? I'm facing the wall so the distractions around me are not just focused on my area. Okay, so you like how it's facing, I'm facing there, the distractions are gone on the sides? Yeah. Oh.
along the same spot, it's up against the wall, so there's no, the other one looks like, oh, which side do I sit on? Or maybe I'll sit over here and then I'll walk around the table,
Okay.
circle it, or I'll sit on the other side.
Okay. So even where you sit, where I position myself for you is a little clearer on the bottom one. Yeah.
I feel like there's less stuff in the bottom one, which makes me feel more comfortable, like I know what I'm supposed to do when I'm there.
Okay. All
There's
right.
not too many choices.
So the other one feels like there's so many things for you that I don't really know what to do. Okay. Anybody attracted to the one on the left? Not so much, someone said, not so much. Yeah.
My daughter probably would be because she loves art, and anytime she can get her hands on paper and scissors and just cut and do whatever, like that would be her bag of tricks right there.
So usually we've had at least one or two people in an audience that says, I would be afraid of making a mistake here. It's too structured. I want to go and do my own thing. I want to be creative and cut out what I want. I want to draw what I want. I want that area where I could just pick and choose. So again, it's knowing, we can imagine that, right? That there might be some children like that, be they early childhood, be they older children, that want just a blank journal and be able to write whatever they want and tell a story. Someone else might want some sentence starters. Give me some prompts. Give me some ways to how do I get moving? Same kind of thing. So thinking of an environment and thinking of the children in your classroom. You may have some kids who never go to this space and you can't figure out why. Or your space looks like this and you have children who never show up there and you're like, well, why don't they go there? Why are some of the kids not going there? So considering what their style of learning is, what their interests are, and what may make them be drawn to one versus the other. Any of you have places that look like this? Yeah, my house, at home. Exactly, at home. And here's another kind of environmental arrangement. So, and it's similar to what whoever just said, that the last one, you don't know where to sit. Here's an option where there's flexible positioning. You can stand, you can sit, it doesn't matter. So we've been in some classrooms where teachers are are more rigid or more limited. They want children to sit here. Some classes where it doesn't matter. If you want to stand and play with it, I don't care, move around. So then helping children understand what are the guidelines for this, that yeah, you can be flexible. You can stand, you're doing the Play-Doh, the clay, gives you more pressure to do it. Doesn't matter to me if you move around the table. Okay, now this is 3 different pictures. So there's one up here, then we'll talk about this one, and then we'll go to the one over there. This one, the colors aren't so great, but this right here is green, and it's textured. So what does that tell you about lining up outside? Yeah, stay on the path. You can feel it. So if you're a child with visual impairments, you can probably feel where it's different. There's a brick wall next to it, so you've got a barrier on the side. So it's helping children know where to line up when they're coming in from outdoor playtime with some visual or tactile cues. Okay, then we go to this one down here. The teachers have made some markers, those blue, see the blue stripes? On the wall or on the wooden fence, so that children kind of personal space we were talking about earlier. So this is where pick a space and line up. Okay, so some visual, could be tactile, kids could feel depending on what you had there, so that they can have a space. The one on the left, or your right, gives them cues. There are some dinosaur feet right here of where to position their feet to line up. And then there's a line, a green line, it looks like there, I think it's red on mine, a red line of stopping here. So line up, but don't go any further than this. A teacher will need to bring you into the building. So things we can do in the environment to help children be independent, somewhat independent, but also to decrease the chances of challenging behavior. Because kids have space, they're kind of identified in some cases where their space is, but also kind of what the expectations are for these environments. So if we set up things like that, then we're preventing challenging behavior from occurring. When we think about how we structure our environment, when we think about how we're arranging the outdoor space like that, it might keep children from engaging in challenging behavior. So think about how you might design environments for a child who has difficulty with peers, or design centers or activities to support a child with visual impairments, or a child who engages in challenging behavior. So what are some ways, I just want you to think about it, in your own work that you might think about the environments you have right now, the ones that are most problematic for you, and are there things you can do to help make them be less of an opportunity for challenging behavior to occur? Anybody thinking of any right now? An environment where you go, gee, I have a lot of problems in that every single day in that particular space. I'm complaining about whatever or correcting behavior around whatever. Yeah.
I have a OT box with just a bunch of sensory tools that the kids can access, and in the past, I've had students who could kind of self-regulate and make good choices about what worked well for them, and this year, not so much. So I've had to say, you have to ask me before you go into that box. I'll close the top of the box, and it prevents kids from just kind of digging in there. And then also I had to remove some things that we talked about. I taught how to use it appropriately, and they just continued to not. So I just, whoop, we'll put that away and try it again later in the year maybe.
Yeah. No, I think a couple things you said, really good points. So covering it, even putting a stop sign on the top, that it's like, no, you can't go in here without asking. So making it really obvious that this, you don't just help yourself. But I also think the point of, I could do this last year, but not with this group of kids, not so much. So sometimes we get into routines like, this environment worked really well for the last 5 years that I've taught. Now all of a sudden I have a child or a combination of kids that it's not working so well. They're developmentally younger, they have more significant disabilities, whatever the case may be. They haven't learned the expectations yet. So, but we always want to think about it as a developmental progression. So where we start at the beginning of the year, our goal is to move along, right? So that by mid-year, by the end of the year, the kids are at a place farther down the road. But we might have to start a little bit further down the continuum developmentally this year with what we allow kids to do independently. Yeah, good example. Anybody else? All right, we'll be thinking about your environments. Next, we're going to talk briefly about schedules and routines. That, of course, we want a balance of activities, some active, some not so active, some small group, some one-on-one, some large group, across a day for children. And we want to structure activities so there's a beginning and a middle and an end. Okay? So kids know, because sometimes children, they can't anticipate what's coming next, or how long are we going to be here? We've tried today to say, okay, we'll do this for this much time, or Sherry started saying, here's where your breaks are. If you know when that's coming, then you kind of go, okay, I can wait 5 more minutes because I know we're going to get a coffee break, or okay, I'm not going to eat this granola now because I know the fajitas are coming in 15 minutes. So it helps all of us too to know what the schedule is. It certainly helps children with disabilities. We have to teach children the schedule. We have to establish a routine and follow it consistently. Now things are going to come up, right? And we're going to have to change the schedule. But especially at the beginning when we're teaching it to children, to be as consistent as we can. And what are the expectations within each routine? Making sure children know that. When we have to make changes, make kids aware of it so that they're prepared for those changes, especially children. I mean, think about kids you might have worked with who are dually diagnosed with autism too. Kids who might have a really hard time with changes in a routine. We have to prepare them. We have to help them anticipate what's coming, and then providing the individualized support if necessary. So, things like we have our own schedule books. For young children, we might have schedules on the wall. We may turn things around with Velcro so that they know one activity ended when another, and then another one's going to begin. A lot of teachers will use photos of children, particularly when we have young children or children with disabilities, so they can see them and their friends engaged in the activity. So they can't read that it's art time, but they can see a picture and they associate that picture with it. And you might have individual schedules for the students with whom you work, like we have our own individual schedule book. And you may use things like Velcro so that kids can close it when they know the activity is over, when the schedule has ended. Okay, so let's watch this video of what a teacher did when there's a change in the routine. And again, it's an early childhood classroom, but I think you'll get that idea. Oops. Oops, sorry, I just want to make sure it's the right one.
Okay, have we arrived at school
So she makes it fun too, right? It's raining outside, but we'll do something fun. But she's going over the schedule with them in anticipation. So when it comes to outside time, we're not having meltdowns then. Children already are anticipating, okay, we're not going to go outside today. We're going to do a different activity. Okay, and then this is like a morning meeting schedule. First, we're going to do these things, then we're going to do this. The kind of idea you could use with one child or as a group. One of my PhD students a couple years ago did a study on circle time in preschool and Head Start classrooms, public preschool and Head Start. And one of the things we realized then for these young children with and without disabilities is that there actually were multiple transitions within one activity like morning meeting. So if you really think about it from a young child's perspective, they were doing like an attendance activity, who's here today. Then someone went and they did a weather activity, so she had some different props for that. Then they did a calendar activity. Then they read a story. Each one of those is there's a transition involved in it. It's a different activity. The teacher may or may not be bringing different prompts. Children may or may not be asked to respond, maybe choral responding or do some different activities. For some of our children who engage in challenging behaviors, that can be a lot. So to sit there for 15 minutes but have 5 or 6 different activities in that one morning meeting may be really trying for that child with challenging behavior. So we may want to think about, could we do 2 meetings? A 10-minute one here and a 10-minute one here, or a 5 minutes and then 5 minutes. So there aren't so many changes if this year's group of children or this particular child is really struggling with that many change my attention, focus on this, focus on that. Make sense? And it became really clear to me watching those kids and how multiple teachers ran morning meetings, some of which were 15 minutes long. The longest one went 40 minutes. That in and of itself was problematic for preschoolers, way too long. So thinking about what you're trying to accomplish, what your purpose is, but also how much time it takes. Okay, I want to just do, I have 4 of these here, but I think we'll just do 1 or 2 of these. So I want you to think about an example of a child in your class, and you could think about whatever age the child is. It's lunchtime, and a boy walks away from the line. When you try to guide him back to the line, he drops to the ground and will not budge. What will you or what should you have taught, and how would you teach it? So talk to someone near you for a minute. Take an age group that you feel comfortable with. They can be early childhood, they could be middle school. That could happen to any kid, right? Or it could be high schoolers. So talk for a minute about what you would do. Okay, let's talk about some ideas you came up with. How many of you have ever had a child like this, the wet noodle? Yeah. The kind of child who acts like a wet noodle, drops down. Okay, so what are some ideas you came up with of things you could have done, would do? Yes, Beth.
A lot of times I just use their peers.
Okay, so use their peers, how so?
Look at your friends, what are they doing? Just one of.
And will it work usually?
A lot of times.
Okay,
Yep.
all right, so draw their attention to what their peers, what everyone else is doing. Okay, somebody else. Good, thanks.
We talked about different transition techniques. Like I've used a checklist, like on a clipboard, where I have a picture of them walking through the hallways and they check it off. But what we were also talking about is wanting to know what the antecedent to this is, because it's all well and good for me to put these things in place, but I need to know why he doesn't want to go to lunch.
Yeah, so kind of what's the function? So why? Is something happening at lunchtime, so you're questioning that in your head? Is it who he sits with? Is it the food? Is it something that's going on? Great, so kind of thinking through those, but then having like, if the child's old enough, a self-management kind of checklist where a child can self-evaluate what he or she's doing. Okay, good. What else? Yeah.
We had said maybe giving the child like another reason to get in line to go to lunch, like they have to lead their class, they have to be the line leader, or they have to be the one who carries, like I have schools that do like the lunchbox bins and two
Yep.
kids carry it down, so he has to carry the lunchboxes down. So it's more than just you are walking to lunch, it's that you have a task to do to go to lunch.
Yes. So you might have a job, a responsibility like carrying the bucket or being the leader this week, whatever. Okay? Others? Yeah.
For some of the older students that I'd worked with, they would go to lunch and they would be in the lunchroom as the one of maybe 3 deaf kids sitting at a table of a whole bunch of hearing kids in their high school cafeteria with nothing to do. So we were able to put together like this sort of bin of like cards or tic-tac-toe or different things like that that they could bring to the lunchroom cafeteria that gave them something to do while they were sitting at the table with these other peers that they didn't really know. And it really did a lot for developing some of those relationships and having something for them to do that they didn't necessarily have to speak the same language, and it really helped on a lot of different levels.
Yeah, good. So kind of goes back to your idea of why are they having these meltdowns or, you know, kind of dropping to the ground, not wanting to go. Well, if you're sitting there by yourself, no one's talking to you, no one's engaging with you, that could be why. It's not exactly the most pleasant environment, right? So then thinking through what are some proactive ideas you can have so that the children are more engaged and are developing some peer relationships while they're in there. Yeah, any other ideas? Okay. I'm going to skip through. I had a couple of those, but I'm going to skip through those just in the interest of time. So kind of, you know, summary about transitions is minimizing the number of transitions, especially for the younger children, but transitions children have to go through. Watching about the amount of time children spend waiting, the length of time they spend waiting with nothing to do. So we often see this too, like at the bus arrival time and departure, children engage in a lot of challenging behavior when they're just standing there waiting for their bus to come. That's when they're in each other's personal space, they're poking each other, they're spitting on the ground, they're doing things we might not want them to do. Prepare children for transitions, be that with you know, providing some kind of warning. It could be an individual warning for a child who struggles. It could be flicking the lights, something visual, auditory, could be something tactile. Structuring the transition, so having children walking down the hall, hopping or skipping or doing something if possible. Teaching what the expectations are, and we'll see a video about this. And then individualizing the supports as needed. And then just some, you know, the transition cues. They could be auditory, but they could also be tactile. So thinking about the needs of the individual child that you have and why are they important, kind of allowing for predictability and a sense of control. So we're really trying to think, too, about helping children be more independent and anticipate what's coming next. And, of course, helping them, you know, move from one location to another without engaging in challenging behavior. Okay, so we kind of talked about that. I'm going to skip that one. These are some of the ideas of like the lights or something sensory to cue in that it's a transition time. Sometimes people will have pictures on the floor, like we saw the footprints on the floor or the carpet. You could use pictures of children and pair them up for transition, so having children move as a buddy system. And you might have to have you might use visual supports. How many of you use like Boardmaker or some kind of visual supports regularly with children? Lots of you do. So you may use visual supports with some children to help them move from one environment to the other. So, you know, here's a kind of visual support. Go line up on and you can make a choice. Do you want to be on the blue foot or on the black foot? Or do you want to be on number 7 or be on number 2? So we've seen some teachers who really use these kind of, now they're visual, but you could have them be tactile too. Use those as a way to teach other skills too for children. They're learning numbers, they're learning colors, they're learning the shapes of animals, whatever the case may be. So here's a teacher who I think does a nice job with moving children in from transitioning from one area to another.
Slow. No. That's fast? Oh, how do we move slow? This. Please follow Miss Karen. And we're going to Are we ready? Come on, Jaden. Put your finger on the wall, on the wall.
So then put your finger.
We're not marching, we're walking, we're using our walking feet. Down the hall, put your finger on the wall, in the hall. Are you listening? Put your finger on the wall, in the hall. Lakai.
Finger on the wall as you're walking down the hall. Put your finger on the wall in the hall. Great job.
Okay, so she taught lots of things during that, right? So what are some things you saw her doing to help children? Now they were kind of spliced together, a couple different transition times, but what were some things you saw her doing that helped with the transition times? Slowing it down. She got her voice quieter too, right? When she was doing the butterfly, we're moving from one area to other. She's talking quietly, moving. What else? Yeah, set very clear expectations. This is what we're doing, putting our finger on the wall. This is even, she's teaching, do we walk like this when we're going outside? No, we walk with our bodies facing this way. So being very clear with the children of understanding what behaviors did she expect from them during this transition. And again, it's an early childhood example, but we can think of middle schoolers or high schoolers. We're not going to be using that kind of example, but they may not have learned yet, like how do you act in the hall? I know even, like I was thinking about hotel rooms, having spent much of the summer at hotels with my son who's on a travel baseball team. And like some of his friends, you know, coming in at night at 10 o'clock and being loud in the hallway. And I think they haven't really been taught yet how to act in a hotel, that people are sleeping, that you don't let your door slam shut because someone might be sleeping in the room next door. But we have to teach those things because for a lot of kids, they're new experiences, or they don't know this school from another school, or they don't know your expectations for transitions versus the teacher they had last year or the itinerant person they worked with in a different kind of setting. So thinking about that and how we can help children learn those skills. Whoops. Okay, I'm going to skip that. In this video, I'm just going to skip it just partly in the interest of time. She really just brings over like a visual support kind of cue to show children, to show the little girl, so a one-on-one individual support to say, in a minute we're going to be doing cleanup. So sometimes for our kids, they may be part of a group, but they may need more support that we have to provide them during transition times. So first you're going to do this, then you're going to do this, and then you're going to go there. So. And timers, there's all kind of timers, auditory, there's timers that have vibrators on, the vibrating kind of feeling, so that children can help learn when it's time to move from one activity to another. Another way to just mark physically, either through textures, Velcro, or names where children sit so that there's spaces, they know where to go in a certain activity. So again, things to help children during transitions. Okay, we're going to talk for a minute about directions, making sure, another environmental kind of cue, making sure you have a child's attention before you give them the directions. How many of you have given children multiple directions, even if it's 2 at a time, and they don't ever follow through? It's too much for them. So realizing where a child's at, should you only give one statement at a time versus I want you to take this and then do this and then do this. It's too much. So minimizing the number of directions, individualizing the way they're given. You might have to provide picture supports with it or some kind of other visual, auditory, whatever kind of supports, tactile supports to go along with the directions and being as clear as you can. So just kind of positive, giving children an opportunity to respond, giving children choices if you can in the direction. So do you want to carry this or do you want to carry this when you move? Do you want to clean up this first or clean up this first? Giving them some choices will help. And then acknowledging children. Then there's a lot in the PBS literature about expectations and rules and kind of having school-wide. How many of you have school-wide expectations in the setting you're in? Okay, so a lot of you do maybe your PBS schools where they have expectations, so they usually have 3 to 5 school expectations, be respectful, be safe, whatever they are for your school. So they're kind of the broad general ways that you want individuals to act. And then the rules are the more specific, clarifying those expectations, and they may only apply in a certain setting. So keep hands in your feet to yourself, walk with your group. Well, walk with your group doesn't apply when we're outside, right? That's in the classroom. Listen for directions, use nice words. Those rules have to be set based on the child's development, right? For your classroom or your group of children or the individual child with whom you work. This just has an example here of some preschool ones. We use quiet voices, we take turns, and what this teacher has done is she's not only given the literacy, the language for children who can read, she's included then some visual supports or visual pictures, and it could be that the children help come up with what the pictures are, or the individual that you're working with comes up with what is the picture, the graphic that goes with the rule. The idea when we're teaching children, particularly early on rules, is that you only have a few simple rules. Typically we say 3 to 5 when we're starting early on teaching children rules, that you involve children in developing them. So I've been in classrooms where teachers have said, look, we're having a problem in this classroom with being really loud in the hall. Let's talk about it. And then they'll talk about what should the rule be? What should we do? How are we going to deal with this? How are we going to take care of it? So it becomes more of a group process, or with an individual child even, of, okay, how are we going to make this work better? It's not working for us. Teaching the rules systematically, and then of course giving positive feedback when children do the rules. So, you know, having them generate the rule, name the rule, having children identify if you have a poster so that they can put them on the poster. So if you're doing something visual, children can be involved in that. And then when problem behavior occurs, reminding children what the rule is. Remember, we're using walking feet, right? Or before you go out in the hall, remember to use walking feet. And then if you start to see kids are having an infraction of the rule, reminding them of it. Ensure that children know how to engage in the rule. So make sure they understand what the rule is. So, you know, some classes will post their rules, and again, have the children come up with what graphic, if there is a graphic, goes with the rule. And this is an example of a teacher teaching the rules to children, which I think is a kind of cute way, though you may have ideas of how she could have taught this different.
I have a picture of a friend who's running in the classroom, using his feet for running. Guys, is that a stop or is that a go? It's a stop. Can you show me your red side? That's a stop. I see some reds. Very good. That's a stop. I have a friend, and you know what? They want to get through. So what he does is he kicks his friend's leg out of the way. Is kicking a go or is kicking a stop? It's a stop. Kicking is a stop. We use our feet for walking. What are go things and what are stop things? What are stop things? Now.
Okay, so a couple things I liked about that. She's teaching them, right? So she's teaching the rules to the children. She's not expecting they knew that. She's going over it, teaching it multiple times. They are engaged in it, right? Because they have those sticks. Now, one of the things we've said is it's really hard for them because they have red on one side and green on the other. And so she'll say, show me the red. And for some of the kids, the red is facing them. So they're looking at the red and they're putting the wrong one up. So we were saying that if we did that with young children, we would use 2 different popsicle sticks, a red and a green one. But she's engaging. She has them, you know, kind of, is it a go? Is it a stop or a go? She has graphics to go with it. She has then kind of summaries at the end of here's the goes, here's things we should do, here's things we shouldn't do. So she brings them up, you know, kind of summarizes it with the children. Okay. Last thing about environments I want to talk about is just kind of ongoing monitoring and positive attention. So what was the ratio we talked about earlier that we should keep? 5 to 1, right? 5 positives to 1 negative. And really, I mean, if you work in teams, this is a great thing to kind of pay attention to with each other, especially if there is a child or two who you feel like, wow, I really got to reframe, reevaluate my relationship with this child. I'm going to really work hard on it. Have someone kind of watch you, listen to you, be objective, tell me what I'm doing. Do you feel like I'm giving a lot of directives? Because it sure feels that way to me. So give me some feedback on it. So you can kind of use each other to monitor the behavior to see, are you spending more time using more positive, descriptive language or using a lot of correctives and giving the negative? So I'm going to show you a little video of a teacher who's doing an activity with a child. And I just want you to pay attention to the kind of nonverbals she gives and the verbals she gives that are positive. And then let's think about how you can help adults, how we can help each other remain positive throughout the day when we're, at times stressed out with young children or stressed out with the high schoolers, whatever age group we're working with.
Blue? Yeah. What are you going to put on blue? Scarf. A blue scarf? Just like that. Yeah. Can you read the sentence for me? Sure. Put on snowy blue scarf. Very good. Let's find his blue scarf. No! Are these scarves? No! What are they? Yes. Are these scarves? No, they're blue. They're boots? These are scarves? Yeah. Okay. And what color do you have to put on? Blue. All right. Can you put it back? Sure. Here, I'll slide this down, then you can put it on. Okay. Was it bothering you that it was up over that? No. Okay. Where's that going to go on his what? Neck. On his neck. Where's your neck? Right here. Look. He has on a blue scarf. All right. Your turn. Me. Your turn. Kelly, what are you going to put on? Who's on the front door? Pink. Pink boots? Well, put your color on first. And I'll hold the my turn. There you go. Put on snowman's color first. Pink. I like how you turned it around and put the word at the top, too. Pink boots. Put on snowman's pink boots. Should we find the boots? Oh, yeah. You tell me where they are. Boots? No. No? Yes. Which one's pink? You guys are so good with your colors. I am so surprised you all know your colors. Where are they going to go? There's 2 more buttons. Yeah, and something else needs to go on. Sure. What else has to go on? 2 more buttons and orange. Okay. You're going to put on the orange hat. Can you make your sentence? Orange hat. Very good. Read the sentence. I put on. Good job. Did you see how he switched it? He put hat there first and then he switched it all by himself. He's very good. Oh, look. Is that orange? There you go. Orange hat! Look, thumbs up. Good
Okay,
job.
so what are some things you noticed that she did that were positive, descriptive, as they were doing that activity? Just shout them out.
She told the one girl, I love how you turned around the card so pink's on the bottom or whatever it was.
So she switched, the little girl switched the cards and the teacher commented on it. Did you see how she did that? Or I liked how you switched the hat first, then the scarf, or whatever the order was. Yep, what else?
She also repeated back a lot of what the students were saying to validate their answers.
Right. So she repeated back, she nodded, she did a thumbs up. At one point, she said something like, you guys are so smart, you all know your colors, you all know. So there were lots of opportunities in that kind of activity. Now, there was a group of children who could stay engaged, but for lots of child choices, right? Now, you might not have students who could stay that engaged in an activity, but lots of kids paying attention, watching what the children selected from the different pages, and then lots of nonverbal and verbal feedback that she was giving them. At one point, I don't know if you could hear it on this, one of the other kids says something like, "He's so smart," or what that tells me too is this is a classroom where compliments come liberally, that other children are imitating and complimenting the other kids because they've heard those kind of things, that we give each other descriptive feedback, we get whatever you want to call it, praise, descriptive feedback. So I think she does a nice job with that kind of activity. Again, given the level of the children in that who could handle that activity. Okay, so, contingent on appropriate behavior, descriptive, and conveyed with enthusiasm and being kind of heartfelt and honest, authentic, I guess authentic feedback to children. Because if we give feedback that's not authentic, children know that. When you're just saying good job, good job, good job, that doesn't work. And remember, depending on the child, to use nonverbal as well as verbal, though we know some children do not like to be touched, do not want that. They don't want the nonverbal, and some children don't like to be singled out. So again, knowing the children and individualizing it. All right, you doing okay? Last part of the pyramid. How are we doing on time? Okay, we have about half an hour, all right? Okay, so the next part we're going to talk about now are talking about targeted supports. So these are for that 15% of children who show up and they don't have friendship skills. They don't really know how to engage very well with friends, or they're struggling with anger management or conflict, dealing with conflicts, or emotional literacy, something else we talked about a little bit, your emotions. So we're going to talk quickly about those things. In here, we're going to talk about friendship skills, feelings, anger, and problem solving. So we like to start with this. Oops. If you think about this part of the bell curve as being the part where children are struggling with something, be it two kids fighting over that most coveted bridge piece that has just come in the new box of blocks, they're fighting over it. That is not the time that you are going to teach sharing or turn-taking, right? You have to deal with what's going on and handle it. But where we should be teaching it is here, and there should be an arrow over here, or here, meaning we should be teaching at other times. When we're in group time, or if this is a child who continually struggles with sharing, we might be doing it in small group or one-on-one. We want to teach that when the emotions are not high, before or after. If you think about yourself as an adult, I think about if I'm having an argument with my husband, and if I'm wagging my hand at him and saying, I don't like when you do blah, blah, blah. If he tells me at that moment, stop waving your finger at me when you talk, do you think I'm going to do that? No, right? Probably not. But if we're having a glass of wine, or we're in the car taking a nice ride, looking at the leaves, and then we talk about, we've been having some problems with conflict, with how we communicate, I might be more likely to pay attention to those behaviors. It's the same with kids. We have to deal with whatever's happening in the moment. If there's a conflict, if a child doesn't have the social skills and wants to enter into a play situation, we have to help problem solve. But then we have to figure out how can we teach the skills at other times. So I've given you some slides that talk about the stages of learning, and there's about 6 slides there. What I want you to remember is that we don't just teach a skill, and this goes back to like our early teacher ed stuff. We don't just teach a skill and a child learn it. There's acquisition. You learn the skill, but you have to become fluent in it. And then you have to maintain it over time, and then you have to generalize it so you use it in different situations. So I often talk about, I was one of those people who bought a stick shift car, but I didn't know how to drive it. So the person who's my husband now, was my boyfriend at the time, came with me and drove the stick shift car to the College of DuPage parking lot to teach me how to drive my brand new diesel Rabbit that got 84 miles to the gallon, which was a great car. But I didn't know how to drive it, so I had to acquire the skill, right? So at one point he got out of the car, walked across the parking lot because I had been crying and saying some bad words, and he said, when you can come pick me up, I'll get back in the car. So I acquired the skill a little bit. I was not fluent, right? It took me time of practicing. You know how jerky it is when you learned how to drive a stick? So it took me a while to become fluent in that skill. I'll jump down to generalization. It also took me a while to be able to generalize what he taught me on a spring day to when it was raining, to when it was snowing, to when it was I was going up hills, when I was in traffic driving in Chicago. So I had to generalize the skill. And then I've maintained the skill. If I get in a stick shift now, I still can drive that car. I may not be super fluent at the beginning, but I've learned the skill. It's the same with children, that sometimes we stop after we think they've acquired the skill, and we think, oh, they know how to share. They know how to solve problems. But we have to work at them being fluent in it, of them doing it in different contexts, and of them maintaining it over time. So you have one slide for each one of those: acquisition, fluency, maintenance, well, one slide for maintenance and generalization together, that just kind of explain that and remind you of what that is, because I do think at times when we're teaching some new skills to children, we do forget. And of course, we want to individualize. We want to think about the child and what skills the child needs, and then what supports does the child need when he's at that level of the pyramid. So I'm not going to have you do this with a partner, but I want you to think for a minute. Think in your head of your best friend. And think of the skills or the characteristics why that person is your best friend. What skills does that child have, or I mean that person have? So what makes you smile when you think about your best friend? What are some things? Tell me. Huh? Funny. Okay, so humor. Yeah. Supportive, okay? Comfortable. Feel comfortable when you're around them. Trust. You trust them, that you tell them something in confidence, it's there, okay? Empathy. Okay. You're having a bad day, they can sympathize, empathize with you. Okay. Yeah. Honesty. Okay, they're honest with you. Ask for their opinion, they're honest. Yes? Shared life experiences. Okay. So shared life, so yeah, they've gone, so some of us have met people through our kids, or you might meet people through classes you've taken, or those of you because you have similar jobs. So you may become friends because of shared experiences. Yeah, shared life experiences. I also think, when you're saying that, it makes me think shared interests. So maybe you like to cook, you like to hike, you like to do something together, and so that brings you together. So when we think about children who are well-liked, the behaviors that make it easier for them to have or to not have friends are things like they share, they're helpful, they give compliments, they empathize. So some of the same things you said. Some of the things are more basic, like they give suggestions, they offer ideas of what to do, what to play with. They share materials, they share toys. So those are the skills that children need in order to then develop friendships. These are like the early friendship kind of skills. So I want you to watch this video. There are going to be 3 kids in it trying to play in a circle time, or in a center. One of the children is struggling with play skills. So watch and try to hear what this child his skills or lack of skills.
You are strong. I can see you can lift the chair up. Be careful when you put it down.
think that guy wants to play with them? So bad, right? He wants to be in there, he wants to play, but does he have the play skills? So he really wants to be part of that, but the main thing he knows how to do is kind of crash the car, right? Back and forth. The other two have a play theme going on. They're talking, they've got animals moving, people moving. He doesn't know how to get in there, but he wants to so badly. So as the adult, then what's our job? Teach it, to be in there to facilitate that, to be in there helping him learn the skills, helping the other children be responsive to him too. It was making me think about your example at lunchtime. So you give the kids the cards, the Uno cards, the whatever. How do you help the peers? How do you help the hearing pairs get involved so that there's the children, the deaf children playing together? But how do you do that to facilitate so they're engaged together at that level? Do you sit with them? Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering what you do at that level to help, because they're not like little kids like this, but yet clearly just giving them the cards may not be enough.
So what we did back in resource and back in the deaf and hard of hearing self-contained classroom was teach those students how to play the game, because their hearing peers already know how to play Uno. Our students did not know how to play Uno, so we taught them in class, and then they were easily able to carry that over.
And to engage others to play. Okay, so teaching just the skill of the game, so it could be the game. What if they didn't know how to engage the peers? So maybe they had more significant disabilities. Then,
I had a third grader last year that had a hard time interacting with other kids. He was the only boy in my class of girls. And so at recess time, we just got some, one of those balls that goes flat and then pops up, just something different. And went out to recess and hey, let's go find somebody that you could play with, and helped him to invite other kids, and then slowly, just that gradual release, then we would go out and who are you gonna play with today? And then kind of back off and let him do his own thing.
So you may have to start, like the developmental continuum, right? You may have to start being there with the child, with the young adult, helping facilitate those initial interactions with the idea, I'm going to pull away some gradually over time as they learn the skills. So just putting kids together, and we've argued this for years about inclusion, just putting kids together in the same environment. We have lots of years of research to say it doesn't work. It doesn't mean kids are going to interact just because we put them in the same setting. We need to do some skill development, skill teaching, but sometimes we also have to work with the typically developing peers and teach them to be responsive, right? Teach them what's this child trying to say to you? What's this child, he wants to play with you too, so let's think of a way all three of us can play this game or engage with this activity. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about the skills. Reciprocity and lengthy encounters are the key. So if we think about relationships to friendships, reciprocity, the kind of give and take, back and forth, but also lengthy, over time, right? That it's deeper conversations. That's what leads to friendships. So you can have a lot of acquaintances that you have little, hi, how you doing? How was your weekend? But it's not really a friendship, a deep friendship. So thinking about how to help children engage and develop those relationships. And there are lots of things on websites where you can download, especially if you're working in the early childhood realm, where you can download free visuals that you could use, or you could think about how to adapt those if you had children with visual impairments, but to help children, and the words even, it gives you kind of the simple language to use to teach some skills so that children can learn those early skills. This is just an example of play organizers. So sometimes we don't think about what an important skill it is where children help organize the play of another child.
Make a table so the dinosaurs could live in.
I'm going to make it go back just so you can hear it.
How about we make a table so the dinosaurs could live in? How about we make it like this? Probably we can make it be tower like this. No, how about we do it like this? Put those together and put these like this.
So they're trying to organize, right? Like negotiate with each other. What do we do? How about we do this? How about we do this? So this was, I like to share this because this was the early stages of our social emotional grant, our CEFL grant. The little biracial kid on the left is my son, and he was 3, and the other little guy was 4, maybe 4.5. They had never met each other, but we were on a cheap budget for this grant, so we had to make our own videos. This is how it works sometimes. So we brought them together in one of the preschools on campus and just videotaped them and watched them play. But that's the kind of skills that typically developing kids have. They negotiate. Let's do this. No, how about we do this? No, how about we do this? Now the bigger kid is at Gator. He's at Gainesville, and my son's a senior in high school. So I love looking at that because I'm always like, how about we do this? You know, listen to the way he talks. But I think it just tells us, too, where our own students are at. When I think about the kids at the deaf-blind school that I worked with and how they'd push each other away, even getting them to roll balls back and forth to each other was a big deal at the beginning. Having them pair up where their feet would touch each other and a ball would go back and forth, and them, you know, kind of finding that to be fun over time, because they didn't have this level of skills. And I think sometimes we forget, wow, we have to start kind of at a basic for some of our kids with more significant disabilities or who are delayed in social emotional skills. Okay, there are also lots of ideas, about things you can do to support the development of friendship skills. Some of it can be purposeful, and I mean, in early childhood, we might put kids' names in a can and have kids pull out who they're going to do buddies with. But at a high school level or middle school, we might purposely pair kids together or set it up where they have tables at lunchtime where kids are playing Dungeons and Dragons or playing chess or whatever, where we're trying to put kids together. You know, there's lots of books about friendships that we've used in the past where we read books and have conversations about how did they treat each other, what did the friends do with each other. There's songs in the early childhood area you can use. You can develop books like friendship books, and also like movement, do some gross motor kind of activities. So here's an art activity that this teacher was doing that she called a friendship activity as a way to show children how to engage or how to do something together with a friend.
It's my name, because this is going to be my friendship picture.
And then what are you doing it?
Well, if Kelsey crisscrosses applesauce, I'll show everybody what we're going to do. I'm going to put my picture in my box. And then I'm going to pick a friend to help me paint. And I'm going to pick 2 colors. Let's see. I'm going to pick yellow. And I'm going to pick red. Some orange in there, Miss Callie.
Right there, see?
Oh, I see some orange. We're making a friendship picture.
I'm the kid.
All right, well, come and we'll show you. See? Is that pretty?
Yeah.
Would you like to make friendship pictures today?
Yeah.
I know. You and Lena are going to be friends and paint.
So she did something, she modeled it, right, with the other adult. She also had some cognitive skills going on there where they're mixing 2 colors, and they talked about later on of how red and yellow make orange, so they did that together. There was literacy, they put their names on it, but then she purposely paired them together, had them, or they could have picked names of who they're going to do it to make a friendship activity. So she's structuring her classroom to try to build friendship skills around the activities that she does so that it's supporting the development of friendships for children. We talk about embedding, so if you have skills that you want a child, so say you have a middle schooler, high schooler, early childhood child you're working on, and you're working on them being more social, learning social skills, maybe greeting others, maybe sharing something about themselves. Thinking of how to embed instruction on that skill across multiple activities so that the child has lots of opportunities to practice it and can practice it over time so that they become skilled in it. Because only a few opportunities to try something is not going to make them become more skilled in it. So in an early childhood kind of setting on a schedule, we might think about if we were trying to work on friendship opportunities where children were working together and doing friendship, we might look across our day at our schedule and say, how can I do some buddy activities across multiple opportunities in my schedule? Make sense? So even though you might only have a child for half an hour a week as an itinerant, if there are skills you're working on, even communication skills with a child, that will lead to social relationships, how can the other teachers that you're working with or that work with that child be also working on those same skills and giving them ideas, helping the families think about how they can work on these same skills at home and support the child's development? Because if we only rely on our 1 hour a day or half an hour, or whatever, 1 hour a week or half an hour a day to work on these skills, it's going to take a long time for some of our children to learn these skills. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about briefly is emotional literacy. So kind of handling and understanding, identifying emotions in a healthy way. What we know in the literature is that children who have strong emotional literacy, they can tolerate frustration better, they get into fewer fights, they engage in less destructive behavior, they're healthier, they're less lonely, they're less impulsive, they have greater academic achievement. So, it goes back to the old adage of it's okay to be angry, it's what you do with the behavior, right? So it's how you act, but helping children identify what those emotions are, not only in themselves, but in others. Because for some of our kids, they have a hard time reading the language, the sound, the facial expressions, if they're kids who have vision, to pick up on those. And even some of the subtle things. I have a graduate student right now working with me, a PhD student who's from Taiwan, and we were trying to set up an intervention in a classroom. And the teacher was asking, when are you going to be done in May with the intervention? And she said, we have school, the last day of school for us is May 24th, but we really like to do field trips and fun activities the last week of school. And my student, who's my lead researcher, wrote back and said, oh, well, we'll be done by the 24th then. And what she missed was the kind of subtlety of, we don't want you here the last week of school. But that was like a subtle kind of communication, like, don't frustrate us by having your research team here the very last week of school. But because of the language differences, my student didn't pick up on that and responded. And I could just imagine the teacher going, I just said, we don't want you here the last week of school. So we had to talk about it and say, that's a very subtle form of communication, but what she's saying is, don't frustrate us by being here that last week when we're doing fun activities. So for some of our students with visual impairments, hearing impairments, developmental delays, reading other people's emotions and understanding their own emotions needs to be taught, needs to be supported. So we want them to recognize it in themselves, emotion, anger, learn how to calm down. We want them to use self-regulation. So there's, and understand and read their own cues as well as read others. So there's ways we can do that, like we can directly teach children. When you get like this, when your hands are clenched, it tells me you're feeling upset. When I see this look on your face or I hear your voice sound like this, it tells me. And so helping them identify not only in themselves but in others. Look at, listen to, what do you hear from your peer? What do you see on your peer's face so that they can start to read emotions? Indirectly teaching through things like books and games, using songs and games, playing things like how would you feel if, giving children vignettes, giving children ideas and having them start to think through. It's more than just happy, sad, mad, and glad. How would you feel if such and such happened? How would you feel if you saw this? How would you feel? Checking in with kids. You notice they walk in, they have a scowl on their face, or they're slamming their books down, or something is off. Checking in and finding out what's going on. We have things, I'll show you a picture of just these feeling dice or feeling wheels that in early childhood you can use with children. And again, there's lots of literature, not only children's literature, but adult literature, middle school, high school literature that has emotional content in it that you could have discussions with children about what it is they're reading, what it is they're hearing. I think too with the media nowadays, with so much that we hear on social media and in the news, that helping kids problem solve some of this stuff that's going on. I'm sure you all woke up this morning and heard about what's going on in Texas, and it's like there's so much coming at us of bad things that are happening, horrible things that are happening that can really emotionally get to you, and being able to talk about those things, to address them, to deal with them is important. So you can directly teach feeling vocabulary. How does someone look? How does their voice sound? What are their actions telling you? having kids do things like journal, like create posters where you're directly teaching, maybe proud. So what does it mean? Where's a time when you were proud? Write about it. Talk to me about it. Helping them expand their vocabulary of emotion words. There's some literature out there saying even in preschool, children should have an emotional vocabulary of about 62 words. So think about even typical preschoolers that many of us know. Happy, sad, mad, glad, maybe lonely, maybe embarrassed, but we're really much more limited than what is out there. And then think about our children with developmental delays or disabilities, and it becomes even more narrow. And if you want, I can send you that citation for that article if you're interested. Indirectly teaching things, giving kids, like you see kids playing together really nicely, and so you're commenting on it. You're giving descriptive feedback. So it's indirectly, you're saying, ooh, you look like you're upset today. Did something go on? You're indirectly teaching things as they happen. There's all kind of songs, like the song, If You're Happy and You Know It, you can change it and make it where it deals with emotions or deals with, things like happy or mad, scared, happy, tired, where kids do activities with it. You can get children to take their own, their own body language, their own facial expression, but also just how they feel. How their emotions look or their emotions are playing out, and have them talk about when you're upset, what does it feel like in your neck? What do your hands feel like? What do you feel in your heart, in your body? What's going on? What do your feet feel like? So that they start to pay attention to those cues in their own body. You can play games where children make faces, so they start to cue in on their own face and other kids' faces. And we have some of these things on the website in Spanish too. Things like bingo or a memory game, and again, you'd have to adapt this for children with visual impairments, but helping children learn the range of words and what do those mean and what do they look like, and knowing that we all don't look the same when we're mad or frustrated. We might have different facial expressions. Doing things like playing matching games. We've had a lot of preschool teachers who have done check-in, where kids check in the morning and they put a clothespin that has their name on it of how they're feeling. Kids can sign in, kids can tell you as they get older. You can check in individually with the child. How's your day? How was your weekend? And get them to start talking more about their emotions. How did that make you feel? What was going on when that happened? So that they start to cue in more to those feelings. And then here's like these feeling dice and feeling wheels that you can download from the website too and play games with them to help younger children identify, give me a time when you felt happy. Tell me what did you look like? Explain what happened in that situation. Tell me. And there's a feeling wheel. And of course, there's lots of children's books. So you can find lots of kids, youth, adult books. And we have these things on the website too called book nooks, where those of you that are in early childhood, they're basically lesson plans about the books that give you lots of activities to go along with the book. So if you read like on Monday When It Rains, which is a great book with lots of emotions in it, the book nook will give you, say, 4 other activities you could do as lesson plans around using that book on Monday When It Rains. And it should be on your handout. And then here's a teacher who using digital photography, took the On Monday When It Rains book and had children make individual books themselves. So she made it more personal then for the kids. Key concepts we want children to understand about feelings and emotions is that feelings change. So some kids come in the morning and they're mad and grumpy, but helping them realize when all of a sudden you see them out in the playground and they're running around playing kickball and they're happy and excited that, yeah, you came in and you had a rough time on the bus this morning coming in, but look at you now. Now I see you out there playing with your friends and you're happy and you're doing whatever. That feelings change. And that you can have more than one feeling about something. You may be excited to see that scary movie, Halloween, but then you may be terrified when you watch that movie. So you may have two different emotions about the same activity. You can feel differently than someone else. Someone might like these haunted houses. Someone else might hate them. No thanks. And that all feelings are valid. It's what you do with them. That's where, for us, we end up with problems, right? With kids who then don't handle their emotions in a way that we would consider appropriate. Okay, 2 more topics, I think, and then we'll be wrapping up here. One is just controlling anger and impulse. That anger can interfere with problem solving. that when kids are upset about something, then they can't think correctly. They can't think logically, they can't think correctly and solve problems. And that they have to recognize anger in both themselves but also in others and learn how to calm down. So what we teach kids, and honestly, I think, like, I'm taking a meditation class right now, and it's almost like the same stuff we're learning in meditation, is recognizing you're angry. It could be recognizing you're upset about anything. You know, kind of stopping. Well, what it'll tell you is stop for a second. So tell yourself to stop. Don't play out that anger by hitting someone, getting upset. Stop. Go into a shell and take some deep breaths. So we'll use the turtle analogy. We'll bring a turtle puppet in. We'll sometimes give kids a little turtle to keep in their pocket to remind them as a cue to go in like a turtle, take some deep breaths, and then come out and think of a solution. So if you think of yourself, like my meditation teacher was even talking to us about how you're in a car and someone cuts you off, and right away you might get tense in the car, you might start yelling or beeping your horn. It's like getting yourself to stop right there at that emotion. Take a deep breath, calm yourself down. Okay, phew, this could have been worse. She cut in front of me, I could have gotten in an accident. Okay, take a deep breath, move on. So I think these kind of strategies can apply to a range of things, but we may have to teach them more directly to some of the children with whom we work. All right? Anybody in here ever have problems with need a turtle technique? We have on our website too, for those of you particularly in early childhood, we have scripted stories that you can download and use with kids up to about 3rd grade, where you can just download them, you can adapt them with the kids' names, students' names in them if you want, but there are probably 8, 10 different ones on there. Like the turtle technique, there's ones about going to a new school, riding the bus, there's several different topics. All right, another technique is just a relaxation thermometer. So we'll use the idea of being relaxed is when you're in the blue, and when you're upset you're in the red, and having kids kind of visualize or use the analogy of getting down into the blue, so calming yourself down. And so one of my colleagues has used this idea with little kids that know the Wizard of Oz. Like the Scarecrow is kind of relaxed and laid back, versus the Tin Man is very tight and stiff, so helps them understand those two different ranges of emotions. So how do you get yourself to go from here to calm down and be more like the Scarecrow? And that can be take some deep breaths, take a walk around, whatever the strategy is, you can help the child. But it's them realizing, I want to go from the red to go down to the blue. And she had some kids make puppets to just kind of go along with that idea of getting from tense to getting relaxed, and kind of what did it look like in your body, how do I calm myself down? And again, those are on the website too, you could always download those. Okay, and then finally, problem solving. So thinking about how do we help children problem solve and think of alternative solutions when they're upset about something or they can't figure out how to solve a problem. There aren't enough chairs at the table and they're trying to squeeze their butt into the same chair that someone else already has. So how do we help them figure out and problem solve that? And learning that the solutions have consequences. So they knock someone else off the chair, that's not a good thing. And helping them evaluate the solutions. Is it good? Is it fair? How do people feel? So there are the steps we teach, at least for younger children, but I think these work for older children too, is when they're thinking about what is the problem? What are the solutions? So what are some possible solutions that are there? Then they evaluate each solution. So say they come up with 3 or 4 solutions. What about this one? What about this one? What about this one? Is it fair? Is it safe? How would people feel if I use that solution? And then I'm going to try that solution. So it's giving voice, giving words, giving a multi-step solution to children who are really struggling with, I don't know how to problem solve this. Talking them through it, helping them think through what are the options. So it might be that they get an adult. When we're first trying to teach children how to problem solve and they're really struggling, we teach them first, if they need help, to get an adult. Because then the adult can come over and facilitate any of the other options. So maybe 2 kids are fighting over blocks and you're really trying to get them to come up with solutions, and you want them to take turns or to trade, but they may not have those skills yet. So the first thing you might teach them is come and get the adult, and then I'll help you facilitate that, with the idea that you'll move back further as they gain the skills. We talk about, in order to teach children problem-solving skills, you have to provide lots of opportunities where you present problems to children so that they're constantly thinking of generating solutions. So it's giving them some power. So you might be at, say, a snack table or something and say, I have 6 kids at the table and there's only 1 apple. We have a problem. Does everybody want to take a bite and pass it around? You know, you kind of pose some bizarre, how are we going to handle this? And get them to come up with problems. My shoes are wet and I want to go outside. I have a problem. What should I do? So getting kids to generate ideas so there are lots of opportunities during the regular day where they're helping problem solve things. We create these things called solution kits where children can, you can put solutions like these in cards like this and have them in a kit, like in a bag, where kids can go get the solution kit and then go through them with the visual prompts to help figure out, and they could be auditory, they could be however you wanted to do them, or come talk to an adult and you could read through the different solutions. So they start then figuring out, here are all the possible solutions, which one am I going to choose? So we have teachers often make up solution kits in their classroom. Okay, so I think when you're thinking about problem solving, we know that there are some contexts, like maybe walking down the hall, maybe sitting at morning meeting time, maybe in the cafeteria, where those are kind of red, hot button. Those are times where problems often arise. So anticipating them, getting close to children who you know there might be a problem here so that you're kind of ready and you're there, and then supporting when you can, encouraging children so that they can figure these things out themselves, and then promoting them, giving them lots of opportunities to talk about what worked, what didn't work, give them other opportunities where you create or set up problems, even if they're hypothetical problems, and have them help talk through those. Okay, so any of the skills we've talked about today, all of the skills, when children are lacking these social emotional skills, we got to figure out how to individually teach them. We got to figure out what skills are most important for children, and we have to make sure there are enough learning opportunities so that they can practice. So this means at home too, giving them opportunities at home or in other settings where they are. Giving the supports, monitoring the progress, make sure kind of everything's there. I'm not going to show this one. Okay, so what are the major messages from today? First and most important thing we can do is to build relationships. Relationships with children, relationships with family, relationships with your team. Focus on prevention. So really think about the bottom part of the pyramid model. What can I do to prevent challenging behavior from occurring in the first place? The relationships and the environment. Promote social emotional development. It's not easy, but we need to teach those skills for that 15% or so who does not have the friendship skills, the problem solving skills, the emotional literacy. We have to work on promoting those skills. And there's no quick fixes. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, and some of you wouldn't be behavior specialists for many, many years in the state. And you have to think about it's a comprehensive approach. It requires these relationships. It requires that we look at the environments. It requires that we critically look at our own behaviors, right? We got to step back and say, how am I contributing to this? Why? Go back to that initial slide of why. Why am I doing what I'm doing when I interact with this child around this, whatever this behavior is? And then we need to really focus too on teaching so that we help children learn new skills so that they don't have those problems. Woo! Questions, comments, feedback. There's my email. Those of you that were taking notes rapidly on something, if you need a particular slide or need a reference to something, send me an email and I'll be glad to get back to you with whatever it is. All right, so before it's time to leave, but I want 2 people to give me an idea, something you're going to walk away from and look at differently tomorrow or try to do differently. Oh, sorry, and then Sherry. Yeah.
We as a team decided we really need to focus more on families and trying to build those relationships and just start brainstorming what we can do.
Excellent. That's great. So really work on families and going across environments. That's great. That'll make huge differences, I bet, in kids' lives. Yeah, Sherry.
When you give a choice, make sure one is less of a preference.
Yeah, so next time, don't give brownies and those good cookies at the same time. All right, thank you all. Safe travels home. Thank you for being so attentive. Thank you.